Take command wherever you get your audio. Subscribe, rate, review this podcast. Leave us comments. Help us grow this thing. You can watch us on YouTube on 106.7 The Fan or the Team 980's YouTube pages. As always, Logan Paulsen, after road games, travels back with the team. So he's doing all that kind of stuff, getting on the plane, getting on the bus right now. We got our fill-in, Kedric Golston, who is always excellent for us after these road games, breaking everything down that we just watched. Unfortunately, Kedric, this was a clunker, and this is a really, really tough game for fans to stomach. The arch rival Cowboys in Dallas was a pick-em type game despite all the injuries right before it started, and Washington comes out flat. They get doubled up 44-22. This 22-point loss, Kedric, the worst in terms of point differential in the Dan Quinn era, surpassing that week one blowout at the hands of the Bucs way back at the beginning of the regime.
Yeah, I mean, since the moment I got here in 2006, it was always you got to beat the Cowboys. It's a divisional game. It's the Cowboys. It's a heated rivalry. Did not expect that going into it. You know what I mean? I thought that the Commanders would bounce back after a tough loss to Chicago. But it just did not. It was a frustrating day. You know what I mean? For as much plays that the Commanders made, they gave up way too many. So, you know, there was a bright spot on special teams, and then it wasn't. There was a bright spot on defense, and then there wasn't. So on and so forth. So 22 points. You know, Dallas seemed to have their way. I knew they were a good offense going into the game, but it just seemed like they were really good today.
Yeah, what's the opposite of complimentary? I mean, you're a football coach. What's the opposite word? Because you're right. It's like you think about the Tressway punt that pins the Cowboys at the one. It was amazing. You get a safety on a big play from Daron Payne with some help from Jacob Martin, and you're going, oh, nice play on special teams. But shortly thereafter, you kick a ball out of bounds to give the Cowboys some momentum. And, you know, you give up a big 30-plus yard return early in the game as well. So it's not like you can even say special teams came out well. But we've talked so much about bad starts. Dan Quinn this week in his press conferences ad nauseum was asked about this, talked about they're working on starting faster, playing better on the road. They come out, and in 5 plays into this game, they'd given up a touchdown. Then they went 3 and out on offense. It happened again. And they got their bacon saved by the punt to the one and Payne with the safety. So they kind of quelled some momentum, and they actually took a lead with a touchdown drive at one point, 8-7, went for 2, could have been 10-7, but fell behind thereafter. But another really bad start on the road, Kedric. This is like we're a half season in now. This is a theme. This has been the thing all year long for them.
Yeah, I mean, you know, I know that staff over there tries to figure any and everything out, right? They leave no stone unturned of how they schedule their days, how they go about practice. You know it's being addressed because, like you said, Dan Quinn is talking about it in his press conferences. But at the end of the day, you know, it's kind of one of those things. The more that you press about something, kind of the more it gets magnified. So at the end of the day, whether it's the first play of the game or the 51st play of the game, right, it's still football, right? And it goes back to where are my eyes supposed to be? Am I communicating? Do I have proper leverage? So on and so forth. So we could sit here and talk for hours trying to figure out how and why. But at the end of the day, you go out there, you practice, and when they drop the ball, when the opening kickoff happens, you got to be ready to play. You know what I mean? And there's probably going to be a lot talked about because Sean McVay and the Rams go out to, you know, they go across the pond on an unconventional schedule and kick butt. And now watch, everybody's going to do that, right? So it's just one of those things where you kind of got to know your team. Each team is a little bit different. Each week is a little bit different. But you have to figure those things out so that the Commanders can start faster.
I think it's always easier to break these games down kind of just by phases. So let's do it that way. Let's just start with the defense, right? I think it's more complicated on the other side of the ball. But unfortunately, it's not that complicated on defense. Yes, they've got some injuries they're dealing with. Their best pass rusher, Dorrance Armstrong, didn't practice this week, ended up being listed questionable, playing in the game, and then injuring the very same hamstring that kept him out throughout the week pretty early on and didn't play. I thought from a pass rush standpoint, in moments, Jacob Martin was noticeable. Von Miller did some okay things. They weren't bad. I'll be curious to see the pressure rate. But this defensive performance wasn't close to good enough. They end up getting gashed for 410 yards. They give up 6.6 per play. The big problem for me is they didn't stop the run. You got to make the Cowboys one-dimensional. They ran for 152. Javonte Williams breaking tackles. And the play at the end of the half where he broke 3 tackles and rumbled for 33 when they're trying to set up for a field goal. And now they get the ball down to the 2 and burn a timeout to get an extra touchdown. I mean, that was the backbreaker to me, where it was a 72-yard drive that took, like, quite literally, 35 seconds off the clock for the Dallas Cowboys. I mean, that was an absolute killer. But regardless, you can't get gashed in the run like they did, 152 net. And then through the air, it was just too easy. Dak Prescott in the game, 264 and 3, a rating of 139 incompletions. And they really took their foot off the gas pedal for almost a quarter in this game.
Yeah, I mean, the Dallas offense was super efficient. You know what I mean? And if they wanted to run it, they were able to run it. And obviously with George Pickens, CD Lamb had I don't know if it's a career day, but he had a heck of a day, right? And then as your complimentary receiver being George Pickens, right, that's a pretty good group. And Dak is arguably playing some of the best quarterbacking of his career. That being said, it's hard to play defense when you're giving up chunk plays. When you're giving up 30, 40 yarders, it allows the offense to, one, be super confident, two, it doesn't expose them to the mistakes that offenses normally make. So it's disappointing because we're starting to kind of see a trend with the Commanders defense as far as giving up big plays and not on a consistent basis being able to stop the run.
I want to go Marshon Lattimore next. He gets called for 2 pass interference penalties. The first one was almost 40 yards, set the Cowboys up at the 2-yard line, 1st and goal. I'll be honest, I didn't think that was a PI. There was a lot of contact, but it was hand fighting, 2 physical dudes. You see it all the time in the league, and it's called, I mean, it's certainly called some, but I would say not at, less than 50% of the time. What did you think? Be honest. Was that a PI in your mind?
I mean, I think it's what you hear at whether every high school football game, every youth football game, every college game, even though it's not the rule at those levels, is he didn't turn his head backwards. He didn't go look for the ball. I think the coverage was good, but we all see that last step of did he try to look for the ball or didn't he? And that's why I thought they threw the flag, because he didn't turn back and look for the ball. That being said, you got a 6'5" receiver that is arguably as talented as anybody in the league. I feel bad for the cornerbacks. Now it's the job that they have to do, but if you're not able to touch them, initiate contact, it's pretty much virtually impossible to cover them, especially when they can put their hands on you. So it's unfortunate that happened, because that was a big play. And offenses know that, right? They figure if they got single coverage on the outside, either they're going to catch it, it's going to get thrown out of bounds, or it's going to be a pass interference, right? So the odds are in their favor. But it's just too many big plays, and regardless of when they happen, they just have to figure out a way to give them safety help over top or some type of other option.
Well, to that point, so it was a 37-yard PI. The other PI he got called for was very obvious. I mean, it was just he was out of position and basically bear hugged CD Lamb for an 18-yarder, preventing him from like a dig route in the middle of the field. So it was 2 for 55 in this game. On the season, he's been flagged 8 times. 7 have been accepted, 6 auto first downs. Here's the deal on Lattimore. He's very, very physical. Like, this is the player he's always been. The league is changing some, and I do think it makes it harder for him. Like, even if he was still at his apex, I don't know if he's still the same guy he was 5 or 6 years ago. It doesn't seem like it, but I'm just a boy on a couch. What do I know? But to me, it seems like maybe not, the quickness, the speed, whatever he was at 100, maybe he's not that. But let's say he is. I still think his style, 7'10", 3 years ago in the league, it was more allowed than it is now. I mean, contact every single week seems to be officiated differently. This thing's officiated for points. And so a guy like him, I don't want to say there's less of a place to play that way, but you're going to get called for penalties. You're going to constantly be marked. And I say all this, kid, to say I would attack him. The Cowboys obviously did. We have seen multiple teams do this, where they draw this up to get man coverage, to get him on an island, to try to get somebody down the field. You mentioned Pickens, this kind of big jump ball, contested catch guy. If I'm Washington, I'd use Terry off on him if he's on another team, because he's going to do that Legion of Boom, old school Dan Quinn kind of grab and go thing. We saw it with Benjamin St-Juste, honestly. It's not like St-Juste would just get toasted all the time. He was just so physical and handsy, he'd get flagged a lot. And you're seeing that with Lattimore. He also gave up, by the way, a 44-yard deep ball. I just thought on that one, down the sideline before the half, the penultimate play of the half, basically on that 75-yard drive in the final minute, like that's a perfect throw, perfect catch. I don't know how you defend that any better. He gets his head around. He's right there. He kind of rips at the ball. It doesn't come free. But like he's going to get roasted all week. And a lot of it's going to be fair because it was not pretty. Missed tackles or, third and I think it was like 13 to start the game. 3rd and 8, he gave up a 13-yard completion with little coverage. But I will say the one penalty at the goal line, the 44-yarder down the field, the stuff that's going to be put on posters, I just don't know how fair it is. I didn't think it was as bad as it looked. Yes, it's a problem. And yes, I would go right after him, just like teams are, because he has become a bit of a liability.
Yeah, you took the words right out of my mouth. I was literally going to say the Legion of Boom, right? And they were so physical. We used to say back then in 2012 to kind of that 2015 was they know they're not going to call pass interference every play. So they just were going to be super handsy at the line of scrimmage, down in and down out. And understandably, we're going to get, 2 or 3 pass interference calls. As I said, the difference was they wasn't giving up the big plays otherwise. You know what I mean? So you can kind of take some pass interference. It's kind of like an unwritten rule defensively. I'd rather take a 15-yarder than give up a touchdown, right? And so you kind of know that going into it. It's hard to say. Maybe it's scheme, maybe it's, maybe there's something that Lattimore is giving up. And obviously, people age at different rates. He comes out there, they obviously still have confidence in him as a player. But it seems like I talked about earlier, is his name is being brought up week in and week out for the pass interference calls, for the getting beat, right? And when we brought him here, it was to be a shutdown corner, right? And maybe that was not fair to him at this point in his career with the kind of injuries he's been dealing with, But at the end of the day, you know, we got to do better as a defense in order to not put him specifically in those situations down in and down out.
So I actually think that's a really good point. Kedric Golston just brought up, former long time, at one point in time, the longest tenured Redskin who was here for a decade. But I think that's a big part of this conversation with Lattimore. Like if this was Mikey Sanders still in year 2, or Trey Amos who's a rookie, or even just like a veteran who's scuffling, Noah Benogany or something, who you're paying $4 million to, it's one thing. I think the reason there's so much vitriol and the reason, fair or unfair, that the fans have kind of made him the punching bag, in addition to the struggles and the performance, is heavy lying the crown here. He makes all the money. I mean, when you look at the team and like the size of contracts, his value of deals, $97.6 million. He's got the biggest contract on the team. Terry at 97, Payne at 90, Tunsil at 75 behind him. But, you could look at other things like annual average value, right? Where McLaurin is number 1, or you've got Tunsil and Payne, but Lattimore is right there at 19.5, top 5 in that category as well. They traded a lot to go get him. I mean, they gave up mid-round picks. They gave up 3 picks to get him. And then this offseason, they opted into bringing him back. So it's kind of like they've made 2 decisions on him. The first, to give up the picks. You could have let him walk, no guaranteed money this offseason, and said, it didn't work out. And then use that 19 mil this year on the corner market. They said, no, we're fine. We really like this guy. We think he's really good. And they paid the $19 million for him rather than getting younger and maybe quicker at the position. And so I think, just speaking from the fans, I think that's where the frustration comes from. You gave up the picks. You doubled down on the move. He makes a ton of money. And week in and week out, not only is he not an asset or a strength, it feels like you're trying to figure out how to mask where he's at and it, almost treat it like a deficiency. And it just feels like that can't be the case when you're committing this type of resource to it.
Yeah, I mean, and that's kind of one of those things, was when he was in New Orleans, we saw him from afar, right? So outside of the fights with Jameis Winston and Michael Evans, right?
Yeah.
We saw the big plays that he made, right? So that being said, maybe because he is so talented, maybe he is in a lot more on an island one-on-one, right? And maybe it's really hard to be on an island as a defensive back, right? With the type of receivers and offenses that we go against. And so maybe he's being overly exposed from a scheme standpoint. I'm not in those meetings. I'm just throwing that out there per se. But with all that being said, it's still not good enough. And you cannot continue to give up big play after big play and give up 40 plus points and think you're going to win football games in this league.
Yeah, so let's look at the biggest plays they gave up. It was a 74-yarder, Dak to CeeDee Lamb on the first play of a drive from their own 26 for a touchdown. On that play, it looked like Lattimore was playing the ball, had his eyes on the ball, and was almost playing for a pick, thinking the ball was coming to him. And he kind of loses track of CeeDee, who cuts him off right in front of him, catches the ball on the run, and scores a touchdown. Meanwhile, Lattimore wipes out Quan Martin, who's in coverage as well. So you've got two dudes colliding as CeeDee catches it and scoots by. That was the biggest play of the game and hopefully of the season, 74 yards allowed there. 44-yarder from Prescott to George Pickens on the sideline was the one I talked about over Lattimore. They had a 33-yard run from Javonte Williams. That was the one that set up the 2-yard touchdown right before the half, came with 23 seconds left at a no huddle. 3 broken tackles. They gave up a 24-yard completion from Prescott to George Pickens where he was running out of bounds down the sideline for 24 yards. Javonte Williams, 17-yard run. Prescott to Turpin with a full head of steam for 17. Prescott to Tolbert for 16. So I'm counting this up here. I got 3 plays 30 or more. I got 4 plays 20 or more. I got 6 plays 17 or more. And I got 10 explosives, 10 plus that you allowed. There may have been more. That's just the 10 longest plays from 11 and longer that I see here. There's your story to me. It's a chunk yardage league. I don't know how many times you and I talked about this when you played, and you kind of educate me on this. Like, hey, man, it wasn't all bad. Like, you're forgetting this play and this play and this play. But we gave up 4 that were too big or whatever it was in that game we're talking about. This time, I mean, there's your story. Like, you cannot win giving up those plays. It doesn't happen.
No, you said it best. The fact that you went on that list for about 8 seconds lets you know how many
Right.
big plays the Dallas Cowboys had. And then, the 74-yarder to CD, they were in some variation of cover two. Obviously, the middle of the field is open. And you could tell they practiced that play because as soon as CD passed the linebackers, he threw his hand up in the air as if that's the way that they drew it up, right? That is the weakness in cover two, that kind of middle of the field. Tackle him. You know what I mean? Like, you have to understand, either you're going to pick it or you're going to tackle it, right? The fault isn't in CD catching the ball. It's the fact that we didn't get him on the ground and continue to play. So we turned a 30-yard completion into a 74-yard touchdown, right? So if you tackle them there, they still have to go another 30-plus yards to score a touchdown, right? And so, they're a good offense, right? Dak's playing well. CD's obviously talented, so on and so forth. But you just got to get them on the ground there and say, hey, they drew up a good play. They kind of stressed out the defensive call that we were in. But they also were having trouble stopping the run, and so what are you going to do, right? Every defense is either geared towards pass heavy or run heavy.
Yeah,
And
well, let's talk about that too, because so look, I know what we'll get the headlines after the game and what fans are going to care about, right? It's going to be Pickens and Lamb combining for 9 and 192 on 14 targets, and the fact that Dak threw the 3 touchdowns and had the 130 rating, and it was too easy through the air again. But you almost expect them to get theirs. You don't want it to be that easy necessarily. But if you told me going into the game, 257 net passing, 264 for Dak, that's a fairly winning formula over 4 quarters. Now, 38 points is not, but they didn't stop the run at all. And this is the area where they've been better this year. This is the area where they spent the whole offseason throwing resources, size, Eddie Goldman, Kinlaw, who I didn't hear his name today, actually, for the first time. He's had, a really, really good season and some impactful plays. Looking at the box score, he had 1 tackle. I don't remember his name being said, which is probably somewhat telling. But normally he's noticeable. He's blowing something up in the backfield. He's being physical. I mean, Williams went for $116, 6 a carry, 19 attempts. They gave the ball 26 times to tailbacks for right around 145 or so yards. They averaged, as I said, they got to 150 net, but they averaged over 5 a pop. How did that happen? And what did you see there for Washington to have lost the line of scrimmage so decidedly? Because we can blame injuries in town if we want to all week long at receiver and some other positions. Deron Payne was out there, did some really good things, 3 batted balls and a safety. Kinlaw was playing. I think Goldman was playing, to my knowledge. Like, your big boys were there. You know, your defensive ends were out there outside of Dorrance Armstrong. Your linebackers, Bobby Wagner, Frankie Louvu, Jordan McGee, they were all active. That's your front seven. There's no real good excuse for that for me.
No, I mean, we're here to break down the game. I think, that defensive line, the way I believe that Dan Quinn and the staff envisioned it at the first part of the year is not kind of what it is now with some of the injuries that they've had. And some of kind of, I think, the essential pieces that people don't realize about, like, yeah, you got Kinlaw, you got Payne, but those other guys were there as almost like cornerstones, right? That would allow Kinlaw and Payne to kind of really flash their talents week in and week out. And with those guys being hurt or even out for the year, you have linebackers, you have guards getting up to Bobby Wagner and Louvu, right? And so Bobby Wagner's a tackling machine, you know what I mean? But now when you have to deal with offensive linemen and getting, a surge with the offensive line, it's tough. You know what I mean? And you can tell that Dallas had a really good plan of pulling guards and creating different gaps with tight ends and so on and so forth. And they forced the Commanders to tackle one-on-one, meaning that you didn't see multiple hats at the ball at the point of attack, right? So it was, hey, this guy needs to win his rep. If he doesn't win his rep, hey, we're going to be able to get 3. And like you said, they averaged just over 5 yards a carry, which isn't a winning formula. You know what I mean? It wasn't like they just ran the ball, and ended up with 120 yards rushing. No, like they were super efficient at everything that they did. But they've been that way all year. You know what I mean? The Cowboys hadn't had a problem offensively. It's been defensively where they've struggled.
Yeah, just looking at the early part of the game too, in terms of the playlist, right? 9-yard run, 7-yard run, 4-yard run. I mean, you're talking about being ahead of the sticks here, right? 8-yard run, 9-yard run, -3. That was when Louvu blew him up. 2, so they start to do a little better, but then 8, and then 17, and then 1, and then 33. Like, so there's too much. They were just giving up too much on the ground, too many chunks for Williams. And he's kind of the guy that I feel like is a decent matchup for them. It's more of a physical running back. It's some size. He made a nice jump cut where he made Louvu look bad in the backfield at one point, but like, this is not your twitchy, speedy guy. This is kind of a guy that I would say, okay, that they'll handle him pretty well. So that was the part of the game I was probably most surprised by. I don't know if you would agree with that, but like I would have said today, they're going to do a good job against the run. Dallas will be one-dimensional. They'll get what they want in the passing game. I thought it was going to be like a 31-28, 31-27 kind of game, 34-31, and it's going to be a shootout. But the fact that Dallas had whatever they wanted on the ground too, again, I know Dietrich Wise has been out since very earlier in the year. You lose Dorrance Armstrong at defensive end. So those are your 2 starting ends. So now you're playing Preston Smith and a lot of Jacob Martin and more Von Miller maybe against the run than you planned. But that's kind of what it's going to be, maybe, regardless of your opponent the next couple of weeks, depending on Armstrong's status. So I don't know. I can't just throw my hands up and go, well, this is, now we're going to give up a bunch of yards on the ground. Like, I don't know. They got to have a better plan here, because if they can't stop the run, then teams just get to pick their poison and kill you and play action.
Dan Quinn's obviously a defensive guy. Joe Witt has been with Dan Quinn and is a really good defensive coordinator. This is super cliche, and I'm almost cringing that I'm saying it, but sometimes a player has to make a play, right? And when it really boils down to it, is like,
well, especially in the run game, I feel like too, right?
Exactly.
Like, it wasn't like they were doing anything crazy. It's not jet action. It's not design stuff and quarterback keepers. It's not like Washington. It's got 15 looks. It's Dak Prescott turning around and handing the ball to a dude coming downhill.
Yeah, it's power, it's counter, it's inside and outside zone, mostly inside zone, right? And so at that point, right, you have to be disciplined enough. There's a term we use in football, strain. You have to strain to win your gap, right? to tackle the ball carrier, right? And so, you know, schematically, they look sound. But at the end of the day, the players have to make the plays who are out there.
When you
And
say strain to win your gap, just define that for people like that. What does that look like? That phrase?
meaning, right, like it's one thing to be where you're supposed to be, right? That's expected, right? You're professionals, but then with being where you're supposed to be, that should then domino to making everybody else's job easy, right? And so in
Yeah.
the run game specifically, one, you want to stop the surge, meaning wherever way the run is designed to stop, whoever's the edge to that side wants to stop it. So then everybody else, what we call downstream, can then stack up off that one point that, let's just say, the defensive end or defensive tackle to the play side stops. So we're condensing the space in which the linebackers have to tackle, the defensive linemen have to cover backside, and the down safety has to rotate, right? So it's all about restricting space, right? So when I say strain, you can be in your gap, but it's still a looseness in the play, right? So defensively, you want to stop and restrict. Offensively, you want to push and create space. So when I say strain, there has to be a strain where, yes, I'm in my gap, but now I need to stop the flow of the play so that it becomes like a traffic jam or a car pileup where one car stops, one hits, boom, 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 and then here you go with a 13-car accident, all based off of this one reaction of this car not paying attention.
There were a few guys I want to highlight that I thought did some good things defensively. I mentioned Deron Payne batted 3 balls at the line. He had the safety. Jacob Martin helped clean up on that safety. I thought he showed up as a pass rusher. And there were a few times today, and there have been a few times the last couple games, where I think Darnell Savage in space has looked pretty good. The safety they brought in, the former Packer, Maryland Turpin, first-round pick. So just wanted to single him out here defensively. But overall, you knew coming in, number 1 offense in the league. This was not going to be a good matchup for a secondary that's been getting shredded, and that certainly was how it played out. Again, 6.6 per play. They give up 409 total. Let's get to the offense. So we'll start with the Jaden Daniels injury. This is scary. It's the second time in 5 weeks he's hurt. It's the other leg. Looked like a hamstring that, it was announced as a hamstring after. He was kind of grabbing the back of his leg. He couldn't really bend the leg. It seemed like he was kind of stiff, hobbling off. He did end up jogging out of the blue tent after giving his mom a thumbs up into the locker room. So that was encouraging. Look, we're not doctors, but how much of a factor do you think was like the game was nasty, maybe out of reach, and so you just kind of shut him down, as opposed to the severity of the injury? Like, how should we be thinking about this?
Obviously with a young any player, right? Specifically Jaden, right? And the past history of this organization and quarterbacks, right? Like we're super sensitive to anytime one of our quarterbacks are on the ground, right? Especially when they've shown the ability to be game changers week in and week out. I think it's good news that it is a hamstring. It's a soft tissue. Hopefully it has nothing to do with his knee. We're not doctors. But ultimately, that's why you have Marcus Mariota on the team, right? And it's to be able to go out there and keep the offense afloat and until you can get an MRI on Jaden's lower body to know specifically what you're dealing with, I think that was really responsible of Coach Quinn and the medical staff to keep him out, right? Because you can feel it in one place, but that might just be deferred pain, right? So obviously they know it's a lower body injury, and you have to protect that, especially because, like you said, this is he missed 2 games early in the year with the lower body injury. So I always defer to caution is always best, and you live to kind of fight another day. But hopefully it is just some soft tissue stuff that, he'll take some time, he'll rehab, and he'll come back 100%.
I'm sure he'll have an MRI. You'd have to imagine first thing in the morning back here in the DMV as they fly back from Dallas late tonight. Daniel's performance, right? Let's put the injury to the side because we don't know much. I guess if there's any good news, it's that you get an extra day with a Monday Night Football game coming up in 8 days. But uneasy again. He was 12 of 22 passing. I counted 3 drops, 2 on Ertz, 1 on Jalen Lane. But also there were at least 3 balls that were clear misfires that were kind of layups for him a year ago, where he just didn't have the same accuracy. And that has been a reoccurring, not consistent, but often on theme throughout the year for him. So before I go any further, I want to get your thoughts on that. Have you noticed that same thing? I don't mean just that the completion percentage is way down. That doesn't tell you a whole lot. But it does seem like he is missing more open throws than he did last year. And why is that generally? Do you think it's mechanics and footwork, or is it, what is it?
This was the first time where I felt like not having, obviously McLaurin has been out, not having Debo has really reared its head. Um, Quarterbacks and the passing game in general is all based off of timing, right? And I'm totally speculating based off of the game that everybody watched, but you could kind of hear him if you read lips, not hear him, but see his lips saying, hey, you were supposed to sit that down earlier, or you were supposed to keep going. That being said, it looks like he's missing, and he might be missing, right? And I'm no quarterback guru. Some would say he's throwing off his back foot, or he needs to step up or get his elbow inside. That's neither here nor there. Jaden Daniels knows how to throw the football, but you can tell with the inconsistency of availability from the receiver group is starting to show in the passing game, because those guys practice so much and the timing is so important that they could go out there and just with their eyes closed and run routes and get spots and get completions because they rep it so much. But when you've had the turnover in that room that they've had, you can kind of see that they're not as fluent as you would hope that they would be at this point in the season.
Yeah, they're totally true. The couple that I remember, that the reason I even bring them up, like, it's Ertz, who he had such a good rapport with last year. And, has been, now he doesn't practice a lot. He gets a lot of those veteran days and he's got nagging things, and that could be a factor. I've been of the belief, this is my own working theory, whether it's the Terry situation, Debo more recently, now Ertz. I do think the fact that they never really have days where their offense actually gets to practice together is a negative thing, and it's part of why they start slow in some of these games. But you saw, like, one of those, Ertz kind of settled down where maybe Jaden thought he was going to keep running or something. There was one where Lane's coming back to the ball and he just misses him on the sideline wide. Lane has not missed any practices all the way back to camp. He's probably caught as many targeted throws from Jaden as just about anybody on the team. So, yeah, that part was surprising to me. And for the second time in as many weeks, Ked, careless with the ball. Now, I don't know if it happened simultaneous to the injury, or, if you give up the ball because you feel your hamstring pop, or, God knows what happened. But last week, lest we forget, the game ends against the Bears on a careless, rainy fumble. And here we were this week after that was the philosophy all week long: protect the ball is life. And Daniels, who I just love how he handles himself. I love how he acts in the locker room as a leader and at the podium, talking about, and I don't even think it's true, but he said, I cost us the game. I can't do that. I put us in a bad spot, whatever. He coughed up the ball again on that play. And I think it's going to go kind of untalked about because of the injury, maybe. And who knows if it was just because of the injury. But that's twice in 2 weeks where it's ball handling in the backfield on plays. It's not like you're getting hit from the blind side. Like, you just can't fumble there.
Obviously, that play is super disappointing to the Commanders fans, to Jaden. To me, I focus on his response, man. You're talking about a second year player that's taking full accountability for this organization, right?
I loved that.
And that's when you say he is a franchise quarterback, right? Mentally, right? He's still a young player physically. You know what I mean? And now he's dealing with a little bit of adversity in the NFL, whereas last year we didn't really have any expectation of him, right? And he ran around and won games last second. This year, we think they're just going to start right off at their peak power, and that's just not how football works, right? Each year is a little bit different. The way offenses call themselves are a little bit differently, but the thing, as a fan of the Commanders, as a former player, as somebody that is in this area, for that young man to take responsibility, being fair or not, is what you want to hear, because he understands who he is to this team and to this city. And, it means a lot to him, right? So, when you get hurt and you feel certain things, who knows why you drop balls? It's easy for us to say, hey, that can't happen. We know that can't happen, right? He's not perfect. We can't expect him to be perfect. He'll learn, he'll grow from this. And at the end of the day, once they right this ship, this will just be a blip on the radar in his career. You know what I mean? But the fact that he responded the way that he is, and the press conference and post game lets me know that he is the man for this city and this organization.
Totally agree. Kedric Golston in for Logan Paulsen. I'm Grant Paulsen. Even though some of my anxieties are kind of showing up in year two, like one of my big concerns coming out was his durability and just, his size and the shots he would take, frankly, in the pocket, but as a runner as well. And that really wasn't problematic last year. He played in every game. Now, I would make the case looking back, he probably should have sat for about a month when he had a broken rib. And then the conversation might be different that he missed 3 or 4 games in his rookie year with an injury. But he obviously missed 2 with a knee injury, was out for a few weeks, missing practice and whatnot. Now you've got this other injury. We'll see. Hopefully he's back against Kansas City, doesn't miss any time. But that's at least 3 things in, less than a year and a half that have happened. So like that insecurity of mine or anxiety is kind of coming to the forefront. You've seen adjustments get made, taking some things away maybe, or making things a little more complicated in the passing game. The accuracy has not quite been the same, but I say all this to say it's funny. I think I might even feel better about him, like long-term, despite whatever natural regression is happening or whatever you want to call this year, because he's answered the bell on the stuff we were just talking about. Like, it's really easy to be the man as a front runner. It's really easy when everyone's telling you how great you are to just like soak it up. I've seen it. I've covered it. Like, it's the best when everybody loves it.
We lived it.
Yeah, exactly. But like, what happens when S hits the fan? What happens when the walls cave in? And like, for this guy to go to the podium and be like, that was on me. I didn't focus enough on that play. I lost us the game. Now, again, I don't even think that's the reality of the situation. But like, not every young quarterback does that, can do that. And those types of things, just his general maturity, how every press conference, while he doesn't say a lot, he's not like a reporter's dream or a media guy's dream because it's very boring a lot of the time, but he says everything exactly like you'd want him to. You know what I'm saying? Like, he just seems like a really, really good, genuinely football obsessed guy. And like, I'm in. I'm because of how he handles some of this adversity. At the same time, we got some things now to clean up here that didn't exist a year ago at this time.
If I'm not mistaken, and you probably know this off the top of your head, last year he was, from an accuracy standpoint, like off the charts, if I'm not correct, right?
And a year ago right now, Ked, he had like a run where he had like 4 games in a row of like 70 to 90% complete or something crazy. Like, right. The ball hit the ground, it was a story.
Yeah. So there was obviously was that sustainable? You know what I mean? And obviously he did it at a 4-game clip, right? And in the league, you say, well, if you can do it for 4 games, you can do it. But sometimes there is a little bit of regression, right? And we can talk about, Terry with the contract stuff, now with the injury, Debo coming over, some of the other stuff in that room, and not to mention, the offense looks a little different just to me. You know what I mean? It doesn't look like it looked last year. And maybe this is just
what do you mean by that?
Last year it just seemed like a lot more redirection, a lot more orbit motion, a lot more just like controlled chaos, if that makes sense.
Bells and whistles, eye candy.
Yeah, a lot of smoke and mirrors to where there were literally guys just wide open in the middle of the field. Some of that is now you have a year's worth of tape with playoff runs. And so, to use a baseball reference, right? Like, people are going to take your fastball away. Like, whatever your best pitch is, you have to take that away, right? In the NFL. So maybe they're taking away what he likes to do, where he naturally threw the ball, where he naturally liked to set up in the pocket. But to me, he's at his best when he's moving out of the pocket, and you have to account for him in the run game as well as extending plays with his legs in the passing game.
Yeah.
We want to protect him, right? He is the golden goose. He is the franchise quarterback. We all love him. He's everything that we want him to be. But that's when I think this offense is at its best.
He was the leading rusher today, and it is a tall order, if we're being honest. I mean, it should also be noted, even though I don't think this is why the offense had some of its issues, but you had no Terry, you had no Debo, you had no Noah Brown, so you were down the depth chart a little bit. You still see Chris Moore getting free and running loose for 40+, and you still see Ertz, a couple of drops, a couple of misses, running free, second level. He went 3 for 37 and a touchdown on 7 targets. I like Jalen Lane's game. He had one drop, would have been 4 for 75. It was 3 for 60. Two other targets other than the drop. One was the misfire on the sideline. I don't remember the other top of the head. But, they got something out of Robbie Anderson as well. 4 catches for 36 yards on his 4 targets in this game. He made a really nice hands catch for 13 right at the sticks on a long, like, 3rd and a mile before a 4th and short, I think it was, when Mariota missed Luke McCaffrey wide open. Interestingly, Luke, only 2 targets, no catches. I would have lost a lot of money on that with all the injuries at receiver to know that he got shut out in this game. But to that point, when they shut down Ja'Cory Crosskey-Merritt, they basically started run blitzing. I don't know if you saw it like I did, but early on, Crosskey-Merritt, he was averaging 6 a pop. It was like 5 for his first 30 on his first 5 carries. After that, he had 3 yards on 8 carries with 3 negative plays in there. And it seemed to me like they said, okay, not anymore. Let's turn off the valve. Run blitz like crazy, met in the backfield, because they didn't really trust anybody to get open behind them. You don't care about the speed of Moore or Ertz or Anderson or McNichols or Bates or McCaffrey. Lane's the guy that can get you down the field. He did on a 35-yarder. But it seemed like they kind of loaded up the box and said, Jaden's got to beat us. And then Washington wasn't really able to.
Well, that's the thing, right? And this is no disrespect because all these guys are professional athletes, the best in the world at what they do. But without having Debo and Terry, there's nobody really in that receiver group that scares you. You know what I mean? So at that point, Crosskey-Merritt is the focal point of that offense. So we're going to take that away and see if these guys that, aren't household names can beat us. And Dallas didn't think they could. And, there was a ton of talk of, they had been struggling. They ran a lot of zone. They just went man-to-man defense. It's simple. Man-to-man defense not only helps the secondary, it also helps the linebackers because their coverage is in the backfield. They can be fast to the ball and inserting. So the play-action pass game, it's better for that. It's also better for the run fits because if my coverage is in the backfield and he's going towards the line of scrimmage, I'm responding to my coverage, right? So obviously the switch to more man-to-man that Dallas did paid off for them. And maybe Washington wasn't necessarily anticipating that, you know what I mean? But obviously these guys watch a ton of tape. They have the iPads on the sideline. They have people up in the booth. They're aware of it. But at the end of the day, if you were a defense coordinator for Dallas Cowboys, are you going to stop Bill or are you going to figure out you have a hands up in the secondary with the receiver group that Washington had out there?
Yeah, and that was clearly the plan, and it worked as the game went on. One other note I want to point out as we end the offensive conversation, and this goes both ways, but the offensive penalties were particular killers. Like they were about to go for a 4th and 3 early in the game. Sam Cosmi and his return, false start, 4th and 8. They got a punt. There were a couple times where they would get they got a delay of game out of a timeout, which makes me want to ram a wall head first. I can't stand it. By the way, they called a timeout less than 2 minutes into this game because they were struggling with personnel down along the goal line as well after the PI on Lattimore. But 11 penalties, kid. 11 for 118 yards. And I'm not trying to make this some big referendum, right? This regime's done a great job. Peters, Quinn, the numbers speak for themselves. The record speaks for itself. Like this game felt like previous eras. Like it just felt like this was not this group that we've become so accustomed to, the quality coaching performance and the quality, we're going to find a way to play like this professional level of football. 11 penalties, given up 38 defensively, getting 44 scored on you by Dallas on the road. Like I've lived this. You've lived it. We've all seen it. This doesn't feel like this group since the beginning of last year.
The pre-snap procedural penalties they can't be tolerated. You know what I mean? Those are all things that are controllable, offsides, subbing, getting the play call in. The penalties that happen in the actual play, those are going to happen, right? It's football. You got large men, fast men running around. As I sit there and watch this game, and I think it's warranted from an organizational standpoint, is that kind of like with Jaden taking full responsibility for the game and the play, I believe that these guys have that connection in which Dan Quinn, Adam Peters, Joe Witt, Kingsbury, Bobby Wagner, Deron Payne, Cosby, Debo, right? Like they're going to look inside and see how they can fix it. You know what I mean? What can they do better? How can they be more accountable to the situation? And so that is what gives me hope to say you don't have people kind of pointing the finger or saying, "Oh, I wish we would have did this way, or wish we would have did that way." I think it's completely different. As from an emotional standpoint, it could feel a lot like previous regimes. But when I look at it and I listen to the post game press conferences that the players say, when I listen to Dan speak, everybody is saying what they can do better to the public, right? And as somebody that has been in those locker rooms and those press conferences, right, like that's what you want. Because from the quarterback standpoint, the offensive guys know that Jaden's going to protect them and they're going to protect Jaden, like to the public, so on and so forth, right? So I believe they're connected. Obviously, nobody feels as worse as they do on the plane ride back from Dallas. I think that they've been intentional in building connection and understanding what that looks like. And I believe that they're going to respond and continue. You know, they got a kind of a murderous road on paper these next few games. But I think they can come out of here winning 2 of these 3 games and kind of steady in the ship to kind of go down to November football where it really counts.
Well, here's the tall order. It's the gauntlet. It's at Kansas City Monday Night Football. It's at home against Seattle Sunday Night Football. Coming off of a bye for Seattle, by the way, which is not fun. We just did that, right? The Bears came to town off of a bye. And then you got to deal with the Lions. Now, that is a traditional Sunday afternoon game, but that's as tough as it gets. That might be the best team in the NFC in Detroit to end this 3-game stretch now at 3-4. And they've really made it hard on themselves because at 1-4 in the conference now, you're about as bad as it comes from a tiebreaker standpoint. So you put your backs against the wall pretty squarely here. You got to come out swinging against Kansas City. I just caught a couple of the notes out of the Dan Quinn presser. We're recording this live right after the game, and Quinn just spoke to the media, and a couple of the beat reporters said it's the most upset they've seen him since he's been here. He made it very clear. He said injuries were not why we lost this game. That's going to be his narrative and what he's going to say moving forward. But here's the big challenge for Dan Quinn now, Kedric. I mean, the Chiefs just won 31-0 today. They've scored 61 points the last 2 weeks. They're getting extra rest at home. You're going to Arrowhead, really tough place to play. And it feels like, the season's on the brink a little bit after this loss with this stretch coming up. So I guess we could end the conversation with your thoughts on how Dan Quinn will handle this week. Seems like maybe he's turning up the heat a little bit, at least publicly, with how he is talking about his team.
He knows the vibe. He knows what that locker room is. He knows what he needs to do for his players to go out there and compete, right? What a great opportunity to go on the Arrowhead and beat the Chiefs. You know what I mean? Like the motivation is going to be there. It's going to be a great atmosphere, great environment. You're playing against potential Hall of Famers and Patrick Mahomes, Travis Kelce. They got Chris Jones over there. So as a player, man, we got it laid out for us to go out there and compete against some of the best to ever do it, right? And to win a football game so that we can get back on the right track. You know what I mean? So I think going to Kansas City is actually beneficial because they have all the motivation in the world outside of it being their job, but to really go and compete against some of the best to ever do it.
Kedric Golston in for Logan Paulsen after every road game as Logan makes his way back. So the lay of the land for Take Command this week, we will have a pod available for you on your feed Tuesday morning, should be up sometime Monday evening on our film breakdown of this fiasco in Dallas. And then we will be looking ahead to Monday Night Football with a film preview of Kansas City and how they've gotten their offense back on track. Rashee Rice, a couple of touchdowns in his return today. It's a 22-point loss for the Commanders, their largest loss of the Dan Quinn era, 44-22. They commit 11 penalties. They give up 400 yards. Jaden Daniels leaves via injury, MRI scheduled for tomorrow. Other than that, the play was pretty good, I guess, Mrs. Lincoln. For Kedric Golston, Grant Paulsen saying so long. Subscribe, rate, review, send the pod around. Tell your friends about it. We do it 3 times a week. You can watch us on YouTube, 1067 The Fan, Team 980 YouTube channels. Thanks for checking out Take Command.